Jim, let's end today with four.
In today, there's still about another 7 hours of it left, but I'm in favor of calling it here. We might miss the severe storms.
Well, first, let's do some from the files, and I said I'll do this. I have the Eddie Gilbert file here from the Wrestling News Archive. And, here Dennis's...
Which is actually apropos because the Dark Side of the Ring on Eddie Gilbert is about to air.
For the Eddie Gilbert Memorial Show in 96 that you and I both went to, does it say, it says Jerry the King Lawler in the official thing, not Jerry Thinking Lawler.
Thinking Lawler.
Full page ad, $150, half page, $100, quarter of a page, $75, or a business card size, $50. Payable to the National Wrestling Alliance. That's not the typical thing that you see in here, but let's, there's a lot of pictures. Eddie sent in a lot of pictures of himself. There were 8x10s. There's a letter to Jim Melby. Jim, thought I would send you a new color photo of myself. Thanks very, very much for the photo on the front issue of Review and Story. Also, thanks for the programs you've been sending home. Thanks again, your friend, Eddie Gilbert.
Eddie loved to send pictures to all the magazines because he was promoting himself. He was, there's nothing wrong with that. He wanted to make sure that if he was going to get some press, he wanted to cooperate.
And also, unlike any other wrestler, by and large, he had been schmoozing with all these people for years. They all knew who he was before he broke into the business.
Yeah.
There's another one. Jim, hello, old buddy. How's everything going? Fine, I hope. Here's some things on Puerto Rico. We won the North American tag titles from Moondogs, June 5th. Kangaroos, Don Kent and John Heffernan. Who's John Heffernan?
That was, oh, God damn it.
Managed by Al Costello of the World Tag Team Champions.
The original Kangaroos were Al Costello and Roy Heffernan. And then Heffernan went back to Australia or whatever he did. And Costello had a couple of different partners, maybe not as Kangaroos, then found Don Kent, and Costello and Kent were the Kangaroos from, 69, 70 through the early 70s. And then when Don Kent went out as a single, Costello was a manager for a little while, but then he kept putting groups of Kangaroos back together. And I'm trying to think, John Heffernan was somebody else under another name. Well, obviously. And I can't remember what other name he used, but in Puerto Rico, would that have been 1980, the date on that? Because had they just left, it would have been 80 or 82.
It doesn't have a date or a year on this? No.
Tommy and they won the tag team title, meaning Tommy and Eddie Gilbert, they were the tag team champions in Puerto Rico in between runs in Tennessee, I believe. And the Moondogs, that would have been, maybe it'd have been 82-ish because the Moondogs had a run first in the WWF. That's where they got the gimmick and then went to Puerto Rico, I think. I sound like I'm playing Guess the Program now.
Tell Norman I said hello. Maybe we'll get together sometime like we did in Kansas City. Take care, your friend, Eddie Gilbert. And again, lots and lots of pictures here. Lots of rare pictures. Pictures I've never actually seen before. And then some of these look like yours. This has to be yours. Yeah, this is yours. Lots of setup photos of Eddie. Just lots and lots of photos that you can't
Lots and lots of photos of Eddie.
You can't really read. Hold on. Let me go back here. This is a big file. I have a letter from Norm Keitzer to Eddie Gilbert. Oh, this may answer your question slightly. July 27th, 1982. Mr. Eddie Gilbert, St. Tropez, apartment 3F. Isla Verde, I believe that's how you would say it, who knows, Puerto Rico 00913. Dear Eddie, it was nice hearing from you. Thanks for the program and photos. I will see to it that they are used in our publications. The program is also of a help in compiling area close-ups. I was glad to see that you and your dad were being put over. Evidently, you guys are popular with the fans, winning the straps and all. How long do you plan on staying in Puerto Rico? Also, what is the attendance averaging? I've heard from other guys that Puerto Rico's a fun place to work if you can make the money. It must be nice to at least catch some beach action, excuse me. Puerto Rico not known as a well-paying territory, Jim?
Well, no, if you can make the money, it could be good or bad. And I don't have any personal experience down there, thankfully, and on purpose. I wasn't going to go to Puerto Rico and be set on fire by those people. But I've talked to a bunch of guys, and Dutch booked down there for ever and eons. And what they would do is let's say you were supposed to make $750 one week, but they'd give you 500. They say, "Oh, we're doing a little slow. We'll give you the 250 next week." Well, next week you were supposed to then make 1,000. Well, but then they'd give you 600, and they say, "Oh, well, we'll give you 400 next week." And you would get so in the hole on what they owed you that they were trying to catch up, but they weren't catching up properly, that it would be a situation where you couldn't afford to leave their company. And you couldn't afford to give your notice because you knew if you gave your notice that they'd fuck you on the rest of the money. So you kind of hung around trying to chase that carrot. And that's how they kept guys from leaving the island.
Well, back to this letter to Eddie Gilbert. The people that we do business with all seem to be doing pretty good. The last Superdome show did their all-time dollar record. I don't recall the exact figure, but remember the crowd was 22,000 plus. Of course, the WWF remained strong. Buddy Rose is next up for Backlund around the horn. I'm glad to see him getting the push. I've known him since before he got in the business. We are now doing programs for Joe Blanchard, and San Antonio is doing okay too. They've been running some real big cards in Amarillo and Houston. Recently, Bockwinkel versus the Junkyard Dog set the all-time dollar record for a Houston house show. How big was Dog in Houston by the time you got there?
Giant. Because he had, before Watts annexed Houston, when Paul split off from getting his talent from the San Antonio office, Bosch could still bring in individuals that he wanted. So he'd bring in some of the Hispanic stars for that group of the audience, and he'd bring in Dog, or he'd bring in Mascaras, or he was using Bockwinkel as the AWA champion, and he got Dog before that Watts, as I said, took over Houston. So Dog was already made by the time the rest of the Mid-South guys got there. But yeah, it was definitely big. And I don't know what the record dollar figure would have been at that time, but I know that when we got there at the end of '83, the best house for our first couple of appearances in Houston was the same thing. Dog was on a card, I think, against Bockwinkel. But then later on that year, with jacked up ticket prices, we did 89.8 for the scaffold match with the Rock and Roll, and $102,000 for the Last Stampede. I think the best they had done beforehand was like in the $70,000 range.
Locally, Vern and Wally are having their best year ever. We have been selling out the St. Paul Civic Center on a regular basis, which is 18,000 plus when you sell standing room. I've enclosed the latest card so that you could see who is working here. What do you think of that main event? It was one of the few times I've seen 4 babyface worked in a tag team match, let alone on top, and draw a sellout no less.
Who was this?
The match itself was excellent. The finish was Santana being counted out after missing a flying body block on Brunzell. I think that was the High Flyers versus Tito and Rick Martel.
I bet you're right.
Which, yeah, the footage I've seen, I think, of them in San Francisco is incredible. I'll close for now, but remember, if there's anything specific that I can do for you, just let me know. Please give my regards to your father for me, your friend Jim Melby. Once again, July 27th.
And boy, he's right. In 1982, everybody was doing great business for the most part. And Jarrett, 1981 was the biggest year that Jarrett had in business since he'd started his company, because of Lawler's comeback and all those giant houses in Memphis all year.
Well, that's going to wrap up from the files. Like I said, just looking through, there's a lot of pictures. I'm trying to find anything with writing. There's so many pictures here. But there we go, and that was a letdown. That was a complete letdown. I should have brought the other file that I wanted to, but I didn't. You know what?
I won't make any comments in case you want to edit anything later.
Hold on.